Okay, just picture this for a second. Foreign troops roll into a country's capital, grab the president, and fly him to another continent to stand trial. Sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster, right? Well, it pretty much happened in Venezuela. Today, we're going to dig into how this one single event might be showing us a massive shift in how the world works, a move toward a new reality where, well, might just makes right.
So, what's the real story here? To get to the bottom of it, we're first going to look at the arrest itself, because it was truly unprecedented. Then, we'll dive into that potent mix of oil and geopolitics that's always bubbling just under the surface. After that, we'll step back and see how this fits into a much longer pattern of intervention. And finally, we'll ask the big question, what does all of this mean for the global rulebook?
All right, let's kick things off with the moment that really sent shockwaves around the globe. I mean, just imagine a foreign army showing up in your capital city, not for some state dinner, but to arrest your leader. That's precisely what happened when U.S. forces went into Caracas with one very clear mission to take Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife into custody. You know, there's no other way to put it. This was an incredibly bold move. The head of a sovereign country captured in his own nation by a foreign power. It just completely flies in the face of national sovereignty and throws a direct challenge at international law. And when he appeared in a U.S. court, President Maduro himself, well, he didn't mince words. He called it what he saw it as, not illegal arrest, but a straight-up abduction. He was basically challenging the entire legitimacy of the process against him. Now, of course, the United States had an official reason for doing this. The charges they laid out against President Maduro were really serious. They painted a picture of him as a narco-terrorist who was deep into smuggling cocaine and weapons. But, and this is a big but, as we're about to see, a lot of experts think there's way more going on here. So the official line is narco-terrorism. But is that the whole picture? To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to peel back that official layer and look at the powerful currents of energy, global power, and straight-up competition that are driving this thing. And that's really the key question, isn't it? Do charges of drug trafficking, however serious, actually explain an action of this scale? Or is it possible that this is just a convenient cover story to achieve some other, much bigger strategic goals? Well, a lot of experts are leaning toward the latter. And this is where it gets really interesting. On one side, you have the official U.S. justification. On the other, you have analysis from people like Professor Julia Buxton. She points out that the whole narco-terrorism charge is, well, kind of shaky. Why? Because most of the cocaine headed for the U.S. actually comes from Colombia and Mexico, through the Pacific. It doesn't really pass through Venezuela. So she argues that this label was basically slapped on to justify what the U.S. wanted to do all along, change the regime for geopolitical and resource-driven reasons. And that brings us to the giant elephant in the room. Venezuela isn't just some random country. It is sitting on 17% of the entire world's confirmed oil reserves. Let that sink in. That's the biggest single stash of oil on the planet, which makes having influence over Venezuela an absolutely massive prize in the global energy game. But it's not just about the oil. Analysts also say we're seeing the return of a really old idea. We're talking 200 years old, called the Monroe Doctrine. This is basically the long-standing U.S. policy that sees Latin America as its backyard and says that other big powers, like, say, China and Russia, need to stay out. And it's not just theory. The latest U.S. national security strategy actually talks about reviving it, which signals a much more forceful approach to keeping its influence in the region. And that's where we get to the global chessboard. See, this isn't just about the U.S. and Venezuela. It's part of a much bigger strategic game against China and Russia. Both of those countries have really strong partnerships with Venezuela. So experts see this move as a pretty clear attempt by the U.S. to muscle its rivals out and block their access to all those resources, not just oil, but also the rare earth minerals that are absolutely vital for modern technology. Now, to really get the weight of what happened in Caracas, you have to understand that this didn't just happen in a vacuum. Nope, it's actually just the latest chapter in a very long, very complicated story of U.S. intervention in Latin America. Seriously, this is a story we have seen play out time and time again. The U.S. has a long track record of stepping into Latin American affairs to protect its own interests. The reasons they give might change, the tactics might be different, but that core idea of asserting control in its backyard has stayed incredibly consistent over the decades. I mean, just look at this pattern. Go back to 1954. In Guatemala, a CIA-backed coup kicks out a democratic government right after it nationalized land owned by a big U.S. company. Then in 61, you've got the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion trying to get rid of Castro in Cuba. And hey, does this last one ring a bell? 1989, Panama. U.S. troops invade, grab the president, Manuel Noriega, and fly him to the U.S. on, you guessed it, drug trafficking charges.
So, this long history isn't just some relic of the Cold War. It's a pattern that's now being applied on a much wider stage. The action in Venezuela isn't just a regional squabble. It actually connects to a much bigger and, frankly, much more worrying global trend. The idea that the international rulebook that's supposed to govern how countries behave might be getting torn up.
And this really boils down to the fundamental question that events like this force us all to ask. You know, that rule-based international order we hear so much about, that whole system of laws and treaties meant to keep things from spiraling into chaos, is it becoming a system where the rules only apply to countries that don't have the power to break them? So why should we even care? Well, as international law expert Ahmad Bilal Sufi puts it so well, this system of rules is pretty much what separates civilization from total chaos. It's what allows us to solve our problems with words and diplomacy instead of with weapons and war. And the deep concern here is that what happened in Venezuela isn't just a one-off. We're seeing this kind of unilateral action where powerful nations just do what they want, popping up all over the world. The source material points to a disturbing pattern, from this U.S. move in Venezuela to Israel's extended military campaign in Gaza to even accusations of Indian government agents carrying out assassinations in Canada. Analysts see it all as part of a dangerous new trend where powerful countries are deciding the rules just don't apply to them. And that leaves us with one last, pretty sobering thought. If we are really shifting to a world where international law is just a polite suggestion and the only thing that actually matters is how big your army or your economy is, well, what does it even mean to be secure? In a world where might is the only thing that's right, what country or what person is truly safe? That's the critical question this new global reality forces every single one of us to think about.